Welcome back to our channel. Today, we dive deep into a topic that has the world on edge: the escalating tensions between India and China. For decades, these two nations have been locked in a complex relationship, marked by territorial disputes, economic competition, and cultural differences. But now, the stakes have never been higher. Are we on the brink of a war that could reshape the geopolitical landscape forever? In this video, we'll uncover the critical events leading up to this potential conflict. From historical grievances to recent military skirmishes along the border, we'll provide you with a comprehensive overview of the situation. What are the key issues fueling this rivalry? We'll explore the strategic interests of both nations, including their military capabilities and economic ambitions. As we delve deeper, we'll also analyze what this conflict could mean for global stability. How would a war between India and China impact neighboring countries and the international community? We'll discuss the potential consequences for trade, security, and diplomatic relations worldwide. Stay with us as we reveal shocking insights and expert opinions that you won't find anywhere else. We've gathered perspectives from analysts, historians, and military experts to give you a well-rounded understanding of the situation. Will diplomacy prevail, or are we witnessing the dawn of a new era of warfare? Throughout this video, we'll break down the complexities of the situation, addressing common misconceptions, and shedding light on the real motivations behind each country's actions. We'll also highlight the voices of those affected by the conflict, providing a human perspective that often gets lost in geopolitical discussions. Make sure to watch until the end. You won't want to miss our predictions and what you can do to stay informed. We'll share practical tips on how to follow developments in this ongoing saga and engage in meaningful discussions about the implications of these tensions. Let's get started. While everyone's focused on Russia, China is quietly invading Bhutan in a slow but calculated manner. The Chinese Communist Party's interest in Bhutan is nothing new, and the East's Dragon is unapologetic about its activities. China has been constructing roads and military installations on land that doesn't belong to them. At the rate things are unraveling, we might wake up to find China and Bhutan merged, which would spell bad news for India. Bhutan is strategically located near the Indian Land Corridor, known as the Chicken's Neck, a narrow strip of land connecting mainland India to its eastern section. China recognizes this vulnerability for New Delhi and aims to position its troops as close to the area as possible. India has previously sent troops to Bhutan and is now prepared for potential conflict with China. Today, we'll explore the origins of the border dispute between China and Bhutan, the methods of invasion being implemented by China, and how India could be drawn into this situation. If this issue remains unresolved, I believe a war may be on the horizon. It's important to note that any videos discussing the CCP's shortcomings often attract negative comments from bots, a strategy employed by the CCP to stifle the spread of information they perceive as harmful to their image. Your likes are crucial in combating these bots and allowing us to share these videos without fear of prejudice. So please take a moment to drop a like below. It only takes a second and is completely free. In the 21st century, land grabs can be approached in two ways: the Russian method or the Chinese method. The Russian approach involves launching a full-scale attack, while China opts for a more subtle strategy. China has adopted a low-key yet deadly approach, taking a step-by-step method to invasions. We've seen this in the South China Sea, where their policy revolves around building artificial islands and seizing disputed reefs until the world awakens to find significant territory taken. This covert strategy helps them avoid triggering major conflicts with their neighbors or Washington. This same subtle aggression is now being applied in Bhutan. Beijing has been quietly sending troops into the country, constructing roads, housing, and military installations. With these fortifications on another nation's sovereign soil, we face diplomatic issues surrounding border disputes. However, the reality is that this is an invasion of Bhutan, similar to the lands China has taken before. To understand the roots of this situation, we need to look back at history. In the early 20th century, the borders of nations in the Himalayan region were not clearly defined. This area was part of various empires and kingdoms, leading to fluid borders. When the British took control of India, they attempted to delineate borders carefully to divide areas among themselves. While they succeeded in many regions, the mountainous terrains where Bhutan lies remained largely unmapped and vague. In 1949, when the People's Republic of China was established, one of its priorities was to assert control and dominance over its borders. This aggressive policy ultimately led to the current tensions we are witnessing today. The annexation of Tibet into China in 1950 brought with it the border issues between Tibet and Bhutan. The Chinese Communist Party attempted to initiate a border clarification process, but there were no formal ties between the two nations. Given Bhutan's small size and passive foreign policy, they preferred to remain isolated and avoid getting involved in border disputes. While they would have liked things to stay that way, peace isn't always an option when China is your neighbor. As expected, the situation intensified in the following decade as China began to draw official maps showing parts of Bhutan as Chinese territory. This was concerning for Bhutan, but without formal diplomatic relations with China, negotiations were tricky at best. Over the years, talks have taken place, but they have yielded little to no results, with the most recent discussions sparking tensions that have not been viewed favorably by countries like India. Don't worry, we'll get to that shortly, and you'll understand why India is prepared for potential conflict over this issue. In fact, India has already taken some steps in this direction. First, let's discuss the contested lands at the center of this dispute. Looking at the map, you'll see two main disputed areas that Bhutan and China are contesting: the western sector, represented by the Doklam Plateau, and the central sector, which includes the Jakar and Pamel valleys. Let's delve a little deeper, starting with the crucial Doklam Plateau. This area is the most volatile of all the disputed regions, and could be the spark that ignites an all-out war. Located in the western sector, this region is significant due to its proximity to the Siliguri Corridor, also known as the Chicken's Neck. This corridor connects the 7 states of northeast India to the rest of the Indian Republic. At its narrowest point, it is only about 20 kilometers wide, making it a critical vulnerability for India. If captured by an enemy, it would effectively cut India off from its other states, leading to a military and economic crisis. Unfortunately for India, the Doklam Plateau that China claims overlooks the Chicken's Neck. If China were to occupy this area, it would spell disaster for India, given the strained relationship between the two nations. In fact, it is said that China's interest in this area is primarily to gain a stronger strategic position against India. This illustrates the underlying animosity. Imagine claiming territory in another country just to keep your enemy in check. India does not take this potential threat lightly. In 2017, tensions escalated between China and India over Doklam, specifically due to the proximity to the Siliguri Corridor. In June 2017, China began constructing a road in the disputed territory of Doklam, essentially starting infrastructure projects to solidify its claims and violating Bhutan's sovereignty. With limited options, Bhutan turned to its ally India, seeing the road construction as a potential threat to its security. Especially given Doklam's closeness to the Siliguri Corridor, India intervened. Indian troops crossed into Bhutan and blocked Chinese engineers and workers from continuing their construction, leading to a standoff that lasted over 2 months. After weeks of intense negotiations, both sides agreed to mutual disengagement. Troops from India and China pulled back, and China halted its road construction in Doklam, at least for the time being. The situation de-escalated without any shots being fired, which was a significant relief. However, while China may have stepped back in 2017, it resumed its activities in 2024. Satellite images show that Chinese construction projects have continued in secret and made significant progress on another nation's soil. The second disputed area is the central sector, which includes regions like the Jakar and Pamel valleys. Before we dive into that, I want to address a question I've been asked frequently. Many of you want to start a YouTube channel, but feel camera shy or uncomfortable showing your face. I'm one of those people, which is why this channel operates without showing a face. Fortunately, you can still grow on YouTube without revealing your identity. This channel serves as proof of that. In fact, there are several examples of channels that started in the last 12 months and gained millions of views and made thousands of dollars without showing their faces. We recently crossed 1 million subscribers, and along the way, we've learned some tips and tricks about YouTube that can be very helpful for anyone looking to start their channel. Welcome to our completely free 7-day YouTube Crash Bootcamp. If you're interested in starting a YouTube channel, this is the perfect starting point for you. What better way to convince you than to share a comment from a previous student who said, "This free bootcamp is better than a paid course." If you're interested in signing up, you can do so now for free by clicking the link in the description or scanning the QR code on the screen. Now, let's dive back into the topic at hand. The second disputed area between Bhutan and China is the central sector, which includes the Jakar and Pamong valleys. While these areas are less well-known compared to the Doklam region, they hold significant importance for both countries due to their resources and strategic location. The Jakar and Pamong valleys lie in the north-central part of Bhutan, close to the Tibetan border. This region is sparsely populated because of its rugged terrain, making it difficult to access. Despite their remote nature, these valleys are strategically important for both China and Bhutan. For Bhutan, these valleys are part of its traditional territory, and the country aims to maintain its sovereignty over them. Conversely, for China, controlling these areas could be part of a broader strategy to secure its borders and exert influence in the Himalayan region. The Chinese view it as a base from which they can push further into the country. In summary, the main issue regarding these areas is the differing interpretations of where the boundary lies. Due to a lack of clear demarcations in the past, China is using this to deliberately encroach on Bhutanese territory, violating its much smaller neighbor. Despite ongoing discussions, China has built roads, buildings, and speculated military bases in these areas, indicating that they are not willing to lose them. This situation highlights one of Bhutan's major challenges. As a small country with a population of under 1 million and limited military capability, Bhutan relies heavily on diplomacy and its relationship with India to manage its border issues with China. However, sometimes even that support isn't enough. In 2020, China raised a new dispute over territory that had never been mentioned in previous boundary talks. During a virtual meeting of the Global Environment Facility, China objected to a grant for the Sakteng Wildlife Sanctuary in eastern Bhutan's Trashigang district, claiming that the area was disputed. Naturally, Bhutan rejected this claim, pointing out that the area had never featured in 24 previous rounds of boundary discussions. Such incidents contribute to perceptions of China's bullying tendencies in Asia. Now, let's examine India's role in this conflict and why it is as much a stakeholder as Bhutan. India's support for Bhutan in this border dispute is rooted in strategic, historical, and diplomatic factors. As previously mentioned, India has significant interests in the Doklam Plateau. They do not want China gaining access to the Siliguri corridor, as that would allow China to cut off India from its northeastern states. This is why India is committed to providing Bhutan with the necessary support. It is vital for India's own state security. Moreover, Bhutan acts as a buffer state between India and China. If Bhutan were to be annexed by China, similar to Tibet, India would face increased security challenges along its northern borders. However, the reasons for India's involvement are not solely based on self-preservation. There are deep ties between India and Bhutan, built on mutual respect, cooperation, and shared cultural and religious connections. The two nations signed the Treaty of Friendship in 1949, which was updated in 2007 to strengthen their relationship. Under this treaty, India agreed to guide Bhutan in its foreign relations and defense, while respecting Bhutan's sovereignty. This is particularly important given Bhutan's preference for neutrality and peace in foreign affairs. As a result, India influences Bhutan's foreign policy without undermining the smaller nation's autonomy. Additionally, India and Bhutan have strong economic and military ties. Since the signing of the treaty in 1949, there has been free trade and commerce between the two countries. In fact, India's merchandise trade with Bhutan has nearly tripled from $484 million in 2014 to 2015 to over $1.5 billion in 2022 to 2023, accounting for about 73% of Bhutan's overall trade, with a favorable balance for India. India is also the leading source of foreign direct investment in Bhutan, comprising 50% of the total. Approximately 30 Indian companies operate in various sectors in Bhutan, including banking, manufacturing, electricity generation, food processing, pharmaceuticals, hospitality, and education. The ties run deep. Furthermore, India helps train Bhutan's military, which means Bhutan relies on India for support in critical situations, including border disputes with China, as evidenced by the 2017 incident. Given these close military ties and shared concerns about China, it makes sense for both India and Bhutan to work together to address this common threat and ensure their territorial integrity is respected. It's important to note that India's involvement doesn't solely revolve around Bhutan. Historically, India and China have been rivals in Asia, and China's ambitions to expand its influence pose a serious threat to India. By supporting Bhutan and preserving its territories, India acts as a counterbalance to unchecked Chinese influence. If China were to gain control over Bhutan, it would significantly shift the balance of power in the region. Another concern for India is that Bhutan and China have been discussing potential diplomatic ties. The closer Bhutan grows to China, the greater the risk of it distancing itself from India. This newfound diplomacy could have strategic implications, which is a significant concern for India. Ultimately, India values its close relationship with Bhutan and has invested heavily in economic aid, military training, and infrastructure projects. The idea that China would swoop in now is unacceptable to India. On the other hand, Bhutan is aware of India's concerns and typically balances its relations with both China and India carefully. Bhutan seeks to maintain good relations with both neighbors while protecting its sovereignty. As long as Bhutan continues this balancing act and ensures that agreements with China do not negatively impact India's security, India is likely to remain supportive, or at least not openly opposed, to Bhutan's peace efforts with China. However, achieving this balance will be challenging given the current circumstances. We may not have to wait long to see how successful Bhutan will be, or if the tides will turn, leading them to incur India's wrath.